Silence is one of the most misunderstood forms of power in the modern world. Most people associate power with visibility, influence, noise, and constant expression. They believe that strength is demonstrated by being seen, heard, and acknowledged. Yet the Stoics understood a truth that remains as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago. What is constantly exposed loses value, while what remains controlled gains power. Look carefully at the people who seem unable to stop talking. They announce every intention before it becomes reality. They explain every decision. They defend themselves against every criticism. They react to every insult and feel compelled to answer every accusation. Their lives become a continuous cycle of emotional expenditure. They surrender their attention to whoever demands it. They become servants of external opinion. The silent individual follows a different path. He understands that every unnecessary word is a leak of energy. Every emotional reaction is a surrender of control. Every attempt to convince people who have already chosen their opinions is a battle already lost. This is why silence is not weakness. It is not fear. It is not passivity. Silence is disciplined restraint. And throughout history, disciplined restraint has always been more powerful than emotional reaction. The Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius ruled over one of the largest empires the world had ever known. Yet in his private writings, he repeatedly reminded himself that the opinions of others were insignificant compared to the condition of his own character. He understood that a person becomes vulnerable the moment they allow external voices to determine their internal state. Consider how much of modern suffering originates from this exact mistake. A stranger's criticism ruins an entire day. A lack of recognition creates resentment. A negative comment becomes an obsession. A disagreement becomes a personal attack. People willingly hand over authority over their emotions to individuals who neither understand them nor truly matter in the grand scheme of their lives. The Stoics saw this as a form of slavery. Not physical slavery, but psychological slavery. If another person's words can control your peace, then your peace was never truly yours. If another person's approval determines your confidence, then your confidence was never genuine. If another person's criticism determines your value, then your value rests on an unstable foundation. This is where silence becomes a weapon, not a weapon against others, a weapon against your own weaknesses, because every moment of silence is a test of whether you can remain composed when your ego demands reaction, a test of whether you can maintain focus when distractions seek your attention, a test of whether you can remain loyal to your purpose when emotional impulses pull you in different directions. Most people fail this test immediately. Someone insults them, and they respond. Someone doubts them, and they explain themselves. Someone misunderstands them, and they desperately seek clarification. Someone attacks their reputation, and they launch a defense. Yet every reaction reveals something important. It reveals that the critic has succeeded in capturing their attention. The Stoics recognized attention as one of life's most valuable resources. Once given away carelessly, it becomes difficult to recover. Imagine a fortress with strong walls. Every argument is an open gate. Every emotional outburst is an unlocked door. Every desperate explanation is an invitation for intrusion. The more reactive a person becomes, the easier they are to manipulate. People quickly learn what provokes them. They discover which criticisms trigger insecurity. They identify which comments create anger. They learn which subjects force a response. Soon, the reactive individual becomes predictable, and predictability creates vulnerability. Silence interrupts this process. Silence creates uncertainty. Silence prevents others from accessing your emotional controls. This is why some of the strongest individuals appear calm even during confrontation. It is not because they feel nothing. It is because they have mastered something far more important. They have mastered themselves. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught that events themselves do not disturb us. Rather, our judgments about those events create disturbance. Two people can experience the same insult. One becomes enraged. The other remains unaffected. The difference is not the insult. The difference is interpretation. One person treats the insult as a threat. The other sees it as noise. One surrenders control. The other retains it. When you understand this principle deeply, silence becomes easier. You no longer feel obligated to react to every opinion because you recognize that opinions are not facts. You no longer feel compelled to defend every aspect of your identity because your identity is not dependent on public approval. You no longer chase validation because validation is a temporary pleasure that creates permanent dependence. The tragedy is that many people spend their entire lives performing for audiences that are barely paying attention. They seek admiration from strangers. They seek acceptance from critics. They seek recognition from people who contribute nothing meaningful to their growth. Meanwhile, their greatest goals remain neglected. Their discipline weakens. Their focus scatters. Their potential remains unrealized. The Stoics would ask a simple question: why dedicate so much energy to controlling what can never be controlled? You cannot control what people think. You cannot control what people say. You cannot control how people interpret your actions. You cannot control whether people admire you or despise you. These things belong to the external world. And according to Stoic philosophy, the external world is not where true power resides. True power resides in choice. The choice to remain composed. The choice to remain disciplined. The choice to remain focused. The choice to remain silent. This is the famous Stoic principle known as the dichotomy of control. Some things belong to you. Some things do not. Your judgments belong to you. Your actions belong to you. Your character belongs to you. Your responses belong to you. The opinions of others do not. The outcomes of events do not. Public perception does not. Reputation does not. The moment you understand this distinction, life becomes remarkably simpler. Not easier. Simpler. Because you stop fighting unwinnable battles. You stop attempting to control the uncontrollable. You stop wasting energy on circumstances that lie beyond your authority, and something extraordinary begins to happen. Your mind becomes quieter. Your focus becomes sharper. Your emotions become more stable. Your actions become more deliberate. This transformation often appears mysterious to outsiders. They notice that you no longer react as expected. They notice that criticism no longer provokes immediate responses. They notice that drama no longer captures your attention. They notice that you move differently. What they fail to understand is that silence creates space. Space for observation. Space for reflection. Space for strategy. Most people live entirely in reaction mode. Something happens. They react. Another thing happens. They react again. Their lives become a chain of emotional reflexes. They are pushed and pulled by circumstances like leaves in a storm. The silent individual breaks this cycle. Instead of reacting instantly, he observes. Instead of defending immediately, he evaluates. Instead of speaking impulsively, he thinks. This small difference produces enormous results over time. Because every important decision benefits from distance. Every emotional situation benefits from perspective. Every challenge benefits from patience. The Stoics understood that emotions are temporary visitors. Anger arrives, fear arrives, humiliation arrives, disappointment arrives. But if you remain still, they eventually leave. The problem is that most people act while the emotional storm is still raging. They send messages they later regret. They make decisions they later reverse. They damage relationships they later wish to repair. They speak words that cannot be withdrawn. Silence prevents these mistakes. Silence allows emotions to pass before actions are chosen. In this sense, silence is not merely protection. It is wisdom in practice. There is another dimension of silence that modern culture rarely appreciates: strategic scarcity. The world encourages constant exposure. constant updates. Constant sharing, constant announcements. People reveal their ambitions before they have earned them. They broadcast their plans before they have executed them. They seek applause for intentions rather than results. The Stoics would view this behavior with caution, because every declaration creates a subtle psychological trap. The moment you announce a goal, part of your mind receives the reward prematurely. You experience satisfaction before achievement. You enjoy recognition before accomplishment. You gain attention before earning success. This weakens motivation. It reduces urgency. It creates an illusion of progress. The wiser path is often the quieter one. Work in silence, improve in silence. Build in silence, grow in silence, then allow results to speak. History repeatedly demonstrates this principle. The most significant transformations often occur away from public attention. A warrior trains in isolation long before entering battle. A craftsman practices countless hours before producing a masterpiece. An athlete suffers through years of discipline before standing on a podium. The visible result is merely the final chapter. The real story unfolds in silence. This is why silence possesses such extraordinary power. It protects your focus. It preserves your energy. It shields your plans from unnecessary interference. It prevents you from becoming addicted to external validation. And, perhaps most importantly, it forces you to develop a relationship with yourself. Many people fear silence because silence removes distraction. Without noise, they must confront their thoughts. Without constant stimulation, they must face their insecurities. Without external approval, they must evaluate themselves honestly. This is uncomfortable, but growth has always required discomfort. The Stoics never sought comfort as the highest good. They sought virtue. They sought excellence. They sought mastery over themselves, and self-mastery cannot develop in a mind constantly seeking escape. When you embrace silence, you begin to discover who you are beneath the opinions, expectations, and judgments of the crowd. You begin to distinguish your authentic values from borrowed beliefs. You begin to recognize which desires are genuinely yours and which have been imposed by society. You begin to understand that strength is not measured by how loudly you can speak, but by how firmly you can remain grounded when speaking is unnecessary. This realization changes everything. Because once you stop seeking permission from the world, you become extraordinarily difficult to control. Once you stop chasing approval, criticism loses its power. Once you stop explaining yourself to everyone, confusion loses its ability to disturb you. Once you stop reacting impulsively, manipulation becomes ineffective. And once you stop fearing silence, you discover one of the greatest sources of strength available to a human being. A strength that cannot be purchased. A strength that cannot be granted by status. A strength that cannot be taken away by public opinion. The strength that comes from knowing that your peace, your purpose, and your character belong entirely to you, and that no external voice has the authority to claim them. The deeper you travel into Stoic philosophy, the more you realize that silence is not simply the absence of speech. It is the presence of control. Anyone can speak when angry. Anyone can defend themselves when criticized. Anyone can retaliate when attacked. These actions require no mastery. They are automatic. They are instinctive. They are the default responses of an undisciplined mind. But to remain composed when your pride is wounded, to remain patient when you are misunderstood, to remain focused when others attempt to distract you, this demands strength that few people ever develop. The Stoics understood that every human being fights two battles. The first battle is external, the struggle for resources, the pursuit of goals, the obstacles presented by circumstances, the uncertainties of fortune. The second battle is internal, and this battle is infinitely more important. It is the battle against impatience, against insecurity, against vanity, against fear, against the desperate need to be seen, validated, and praised. Most people spend their lives fighting the first battle while losing the second. They achieve success yet remain anxious. They gain recognition yet remain insecure. They accumulate wealth yet remain emotionally fragile. They appear powerful externally while remaining weak internally. The Stoics warned that this imbalance creates a dangerous illusion because external victories can disappear overnight. Fortunes change, positions vanish, reputations shift, crowds move on. What remains is character. What remains is self-command. What remains is the ability to govern one's own mind regardless of circumstances. This is why silence is such an effective training ground. Every moment you refuse to react impulsively, you strengthen internal authority. Every moment you choose patience over emotional expression, you develop discipline. Every moment you resist the temptation to defend your ego, you weaken the ego's control over you. The process is gradual. At first, silence feels uncomfortable. You want to explain. You want to justify. You want to correct misunderstandings. You want others to see your perspective. Yet with experience, something remarkable begins to happen. You realize that many conflicts never required your participation. Many criticisms never deserved your attention. Many arguments never deserved your energy. You begin to recognize a truth that most people discover far too late. Not every battle deserves to be fought. In fact, many battles become losses the moment you enter them. Imagine throwing a stone into muddy water. The more you stir the water, the cloudier it becomes. The fastest way to restore clarity is not further action. It is stillness. The same principle applies to life. Many situations resolve themselves when you stop interfering emotionally. Many insults lose power when ignored. Many provocations disappear when denied a reaction. Many opponents lose interest when they cannot access your emotions. The world often teaches the opposite lesson. It teaches that strength requires constant response, that confidence requires constant defense, that importance requires constant visibility. Yet history consistently rewards those who understand restraint. One reason powerful individuals often appear mysterious is because they understand the value of withholding unnecessary information. They do not reveal every thought. They do not announce every intention. They do not expose every strategy. They understand that attention is a resource and information is leverage. The Stoics practiced this principle long before the modern world transformed personal exposure into a daily habit. Today, people reveal their ambitions to strangers. They document every step of every journey. They seek approval for every decision. And then they wonder why they feel distracted, exhausted, and dependent on external feedback. The answer is simple. Every unnecessary disclosure creates vulnerability. Not because secrecy itself is valuable, but because excessive exposure fragments focus. When everyone knows your plans, you begin performing for their expectations. When everyone follows your progress, you become tempted to seek applause rather than achievement. When everyone observes your journey, your attention shifts away from the goal and toward the audience. The Stoics would remind us that the audience is irrelevant. The work is what matters. The discipline is what matters. The character developed during the process is what matters. Everything else is secondary. This mindset becomes especially powerful when facing criticism. Most criticism falls into one of two categories. The first category contains useful truth. The second contains noise. The wise person benefits from both. If criticism contains truth, it becomes instruction. If criticism contains falsehood, it becomes irrelevance. Either way, emotional suffering is unnecessary. This perspective completely changes how criticism is experienced. Instead of feeling attacked, you become curious. Instead of feeling threatened, you become analytical. Instead of defending automatically, you evaluate calmly. Is the criticism accurate? Then improve. Is it inaccurate? Then ignore it. The emotional drama exists only when ego becomes involved. The Stoics consistently identified ego as one of the greatest obstacles to peace. Ego wants recognition. Ego wants superiority. Ego wants validation. Ego wants victory. And because ego wants these things, it remains permanently vulnerable. Anyone who can threaten them gains power. Anyone who can withhold them gains influence. Anyone who can manipulate them gains control. Silence weakens ego's demands. It teaches you to operate without applause, to progress without recognition, to improve without validation, to persist without encouragement. This is where genuine confidence emerges, not from hearing that you are strong, but from proving it to yourself repeatedly, not from receiving praise, but from maintaining discipline when praise is absent, not from winning admiration, but from becoming someone worthy of admiration regardless of whether anyone notices. The Stoics called this virtue the cultivation of excellence for its own sake, the commitment to character independent of reward, the pursuit of wisdom independent of recognition. And perhaps nowhere is this principle more visible than in the Stoic concept of amor fati, love of fate. Most people tolerate adversity reluctantly. They endure hardship while secretly wishing it had never happened. They accept obstacles while resenting their existence. The Stoics proposed something radically different. Do not merely tolerate obstacles. Use them. Do not merely survive adversity. Transform it. Do not merely endure difficulty. Love the opportunity it provides. At first glance, this sounds impossible. Why would anyone welcome setbacks? Why would anyone embrace criticism? Why would anyone appreciate hardship? Because every challenge reveals something. Every obstacle exposes weaknesses. Every difficulty provides training. Every setback offers education. A person who has never faced resistance rarely develops resilience. A person who has never encountered criticism rarely develops independence. A person who has never experienced failure rarely develops wisdom. The obstacle becomes the teacher. The difficulty becomes the training ground. The adversity becomes the source of strength. This is why silent people often appear stronger after hardship. While others complain, they adapt. While others react emotionally, they observe. While others search for someone to blame, they search for lessons. Their silence allows them to process adversity differently. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" they ask, "What can this teach me?" Instead of asking, "Who is responsible?" they ask, "How can I improve?" Instead of asking, "How do I escape this?" they ask, "How do I grow through this?" These questions transform suffering into progress, and over time, this process creates a level of resilience that appears almost unshakable. People begin to wonder why certain individuals remain calm during chaos. Why they remain steady during uncertainty. Why they remain composed during criticism. The answer is simple. They have practiced. Not once, not occasionally, but repeatedly. They have trained themselves to separate what they control from what they do not control. They have trained themselves to focus on action rather than opinion. They have trained themselves to value character more than reputation, and they have trained themselves to embrace silence rather than fear it. Eventually, silence ceases to be a tactic. It becomes part of who they are, not because they lack confidence, but because confidence no longer needs constant expression. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they understand that words are most powerful when used deliberately, not because they are hiding, but because they no longer feel compelled to. Perform. This is the final lesson. Silence is not about withdrawing from life. It is about engaging with life from a position of strength. It is about refusing to let external noise dictate internal peace. It is about preserving energy for what truly matters. It is about becoming so rooted in your values that praise cannot inflate you and criticism cannot diminish you. The world will always be loud, opinions will always multiply. Judgments will always circulate, provocations will always exist, but none of these things possess inherent power. They gain power only when invited into your mind. The Stoics knew this. And because they knew it, they cultivated a rare kind of freedom. The freedom to remain calm when others panic. The freedom to remain disciplined when others become distracted. The freedom to remain focused when others chase approval. The freedom to remain silent when others demand reaction. That freedom is available to anyone willing to practice it. Not tomorrow. Not eventually, but now. With the next criticism, the next provocation. The next misunderstanding, the next obstacle. When that moment arrives, remember this: you do not need to react to prove your strength. You do not need to explain yourself to prove your worth. You do not need to win every argument to protect your character. The strongest response is often no response. The greatest victory is often mastery over yourself, and the most powerful weapon you will ever possess is the one few people have the discipline to wield. Your silence